Welcome to Global View. Today I have the pleasure to introduce a very special guest, Michael Gates, City Attorney of Huntington Beach and a former Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. At federal level, he served inside the Department of Justice, working on constitutional law and civil rights enforcement. At the local level, as City Attorney, he has taken on the state of California on issues like public safety, housing, and local control. Now he's running as the Republican candidate for California Attorney General. Thank you for joining the show.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Thank you. You bring both federal and local experience to this race at a time when many Californians feel that public safety is a growing concern. How would you address the most compelling issue in California, which is actually a safety crisis?
Yeah, I think you're right. Everyday Californians, Democrats, Independents, and Republicans alike, right now are very fed up with the crime situation in California. We experience it on a daily basis. And unfortunately, for a lot of the most vulnerable communities in the state of California, they're hardest hit by high crime rates. Violent criminals, frankly, are not only running the streets, they are controlling the streets. And that leaves hardworking, tax-paying citizens, hardworking, everyday Californians. It basically means that they can't leave their house. They don't feel safe to leave their house. And if they do leave their house, they're at risk for, risking their safety or in some cases, even their life. And so this is a very, very serious issue. And if you ask those in places like Los Angeles and San Francisco, crime is the most important issue. Now, the current Attorney General, Rob Bonta, will tell you that, crime rates are no higher than they have been in the past. And the reality is we are all experiencing crime, unreasonable and unacceptable crime rates every single day in California, in every neighborhood up and down the state. Also, if you look at the national rankings, California is ranked sixth as highest in crime in the entire nation. So out of 50 states, California is sixth tops in terms of the highest crime rates and the most crime. So, and we feel that here in California. When I was the city attorney of Huntington Beach, which I was elected in 2014 and reelected in 18 and then 22 before I resigned in 25 to go back and work in DC for the Department of Justice. During my time as city attorney for that 10-year span, I made fighting crime a high priority. So the quality of life crimes that everybody experiences, we were tough on crime in Huntington Beach. In fact, in response to the passage of Prop 47 and 57, in 2017, I actually started a city-level criminal prosecutor program, and that's pretty rare. Most cities do not have a city-level criminal prosecutor program. In the county of Orange, for example, when I started that city-level criminal prosecutor program in 2017, Huntington Beach was only the second city in the entire county of 34 cities to even have a city-level prosecutor program. What that does is it's like a baby district attorney, a baby DA operating at the city level, which is a second layer of prosecution working with the county DA to fight crime, to support the good work that our police are doing and to provide the follow through for prosecution so that wrongdoers and criminals actually go to jail and they pay a penalty for committing crimes in our streets and in our neighborhoods. So it was a very effective program. Within the first year alone in Huntington Beach in 2017, within the first year alone, we reduced crime by double digits. So almost 12% in the first year, and then it's dropped ever since every year thereafter. To put that into perspective and context for your audience, Huntington Beach is actually considered among the 10 safest cities in the entire state of California out of 482 cities. So there's 482 cities in the state of California, and Huntington Beach, because of our tough on crime stance, we're ranked top 10 safest cities in the entire state of California. So the additional layer of prosecution and the tough on crime approach is very effective. We've seen it work in Huntington Beach. And when I'm Attorney General, I want to bring that to the entire state of California. I want other cities, all other 482 cities, to experience the same benefits that we have had in Huntington Beach by being very tough on crime and by providing the additional resources of that additional city level criminal prosecutor.
That's really great to see how you were able to utilize the local successes in your current run for the state level position. The question I had about how you combated crime at the local level and how you are attempting to do it at the state level when you have these very radical left DAs in places like Los Angeles County, the Gascones, obviously Gascon isn't there anymore. Can you explain to the audience this culture of the radical left DAs that are really affecting how crime has been prosecuted historically and how you as Attorney General will fix that problem?
Yeah, so the Attorney General has a lot of independent authority. I'm obviously, as the AG, I would be the top law enforcement agent in the state of California. And I have, as AG, Attorney General, a lot of independent authority. I don't need permission from the legislature or even from the governor to do what I want to do on fighting crime. So as AG or as Attorney General, I have purview, supervisory, authority over all of the district attorneys in the state of California and all of the sheriffs in the state of California. So there's 58 counties, there's 58 sheriffs and 58 DAs. So I am their supervisor and I can give them direction about the priorities for enforcement and the level of enforcement when it comes to fighting crime. And so I plan, when I'm Attorney General, to work with the sheriffs of the state of California and also the district attorneys of the state of California every single day to ensure that we have consistent, broad sweeping, tough on crime approach throughout the state of California. So I can bring what I had in Huntington Beach, I can bring that to the state, and I can bring it to all cities and all counties throughout the state by working with the sheriff's departments and working with the district attorney's offices to ensure that we're tough on crime. In addition to that, I can make sure that we're enforcing Prop 36, which is the law that was passed a couple years ago overwhelmingly by the voters in California. And that was a proposition that was on the ballot that added more penalties to some of the crimes that we're seeing every day, the smash and grabs, the drug-related crimes. So adding more penalties, adding more teeth to law enforcement, to criminal prosecution. And so when we start enforcing Prop 36 throughout the state of California, then we are going to get a better result, meaning we're going to have safer streets. We're going to get repeat offenders off of the streets and get them in jail and keep them in jail and not have them released right away to commit more crimes. So there's a lot that we can do. It's changing the culture throughout the state of California from the top, from the Attorney General's office, so that we are tough on crime. It's working directly with the district attorneys throughout the state of California and the sheriffs so that they are tough on crime and we're enforcing all laws zealously, aggressively, diligently. And then also adding to our toolbox the enforcement of Prop 36, which heretofore the current Attorney General, Rob Bonta, has basically taking a position of non-enforcing it. He's not doing it. Newsom says that there's not enough funding. But I'm going to enforce Prop 36 on day one with or without funding. So we are going to be very tough on crime from the top, but also all the way through the sheriff's departments, like I said, and the district attorney's offices as well.
Well, you draw the attention on a very important issue, which is enforcement of the law. Do you believe there is also a weakness at the legislative level in California? Are laws that must be fixed and besides, of course, a more aggressive and energetic law enforcement?
Absolutely. I would support any effort by the legislature to make our laws tougher on crime, 100%. There's no doubt about that. I would support that through and through. They have gotten soft. They have gotten laxed. But I think what we have seen too is really a great laxing on enforcement. As you know, the district attorney Boudin in San Francisco and then George Gascon in LA, they were so soft on crime when it comes to enforcement that their own constituents kicked them out of office. Boudin got recalled and Gascon lost his reelection. And that's because even the deep blue counties of Los Angeles and San Francisco were so crime-ridden and the residents were so fed up with the leadership in their counties by their district attorneys that they threw them out of office. And so we're seeing that sentiment across California as well, where people are so tired of seeing the crime, feeling the crime, being affected by the crime, being afraid of the crime, that they are very fed up with leadership in California, both at the local level and in the state level. And that's why I think when I'm out on the campaign trail and I'm talking about being tough on crime, returning to the rule of law, actually enforcing the criminal laws that are on the books and not taking a laxed approach or frankly, a negligent approach to enforcement, it's being very, very well received. I mean, people are very, very happy. My message is really resonating. I think if you go out on the campaign trail and see for yourself, my audiences are loving it. They're welcoming this message, and they're very eager to have a new attorney general in the state of California. So yes, it's a legislative problem, but honestly, with the tools that we have legislatively, if we just were tough on enforcement with our district attorneys and also our sheriffs and our local police departments, we could clean up California practically overnight. We could make it safe again. The reason we have crime right now in California, let's be clear about this. The reason crime is as high as it is right now in California, and the reason that California is ranked 6th among all 50 states for being the most crime-ridden and having the highest crime is a lack of enforcement. I mean, we just literally have leaders in a position of being able to enforce laws, and they're just simply choosing not to enforce those laws. So this level of crime that we're experiencing in California is not something that we have to live with. I want the audience to be abundantly clear. It's not like high taxes or high gas prices. We don't have to live like this. If you have tough law enforcement officers in charge and you actually have tough enforcement, you will reduce crime and you will make communities safer. And that's what we deserve in California.
Yeah, absolutely. There's another issue that some would argue California is dealing with, and that's the illegal immigration problem and how to actually deal with millions and millions of undocumented people, not all of which, of course, are not criminals or have committed crimes. Yes. And there's obviously a very big national issue. Do you have an idea of how you would deal with the federal government in enforcing immigration policy at this point in your candidacy? If yes, what's your idea to deal with the federal government to deal with the illegal immigration problem in California?
Well, it's really simple. Every community, whether it's a Latino community, a Vietnamese community, a Chinese community, a Caucasian community, African-American community, all of these communities, all of these neighborhoods, all of them don't want violent crime occurring in their communities and in their neighborhoods. So it's pretty unanimous across the state of California that we all want violent criminals taken off of the street and put behind bars, or not here in our neighborhoods and in our communities, committing those crimes and putting people at risk. So that's pretty universal. That's a unanimous, pretty universal concept. And I think everybody's in agreement on that. We know from the federal government, from ICE, that they are targeting those violent criminals. Another thing that we know too is that these sanctuary policies, like the one California has, which I did actually challenge in court twice with 2 different lawsuits when I was city attorney for Huntington Beach, I fought the sanctuary policies. And the reason is because the sanctuary policies are, as a matter of law, they're just legally unfounded. They're untenable. The federal government has exclusive purview to enforce immigration law, period. The federal government is the only one, as a matter of law, who is allowed to have an immigration policy and enforce that policy, period. It's exclusive to the federal government. That law is clear. So for states or cities to have sanctuary policies, they're effectively creating their own immigration policy because they're sheltering or shielding immigrants who maybe the feds are looking for or trying to prosecute or apprehend, and they're protecting them, they're shielding them, they're harboring them, and that's a violation of federal law. So what I would do is on day one, and this goes for really all federal laws and state laws, when I am the attorney general, I am not going to pick and choose which laws that we enforce. We are going to be compliant with all federal laws, and we're going to enforce all state laws, period. But when you do that, and what it looks like with regard to immigration enforcement is, that means that the federal government is going to be allowed to enforce their laws. And when they're going after violent criminals, the state of California needs to allow them to. Why? Because going back to what I said in the beginning, the federal government has exclusive purview to enforce their federal laws. The state of California is not allowed to stand in the way, and the city of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, is not allowed to stand in the way. So when I'm Attorney General, we're going to make sure that the federal government's allowed to conduct its business, and then the state is going to conduct its business, or we're going to conduct our business. And a lot of people say, we want to get ICE off the streets. And the answer is yes, so do I. I want peaceful enforcement of all laws. And if we allow the federal government to do their job like it used to be done, then ICE agents would be going to jails to apprehend individuals, apprehend the violent criminals, to get them processed through the federal system and possibly deported. But ICE used to apprehend individuals in jails, and that means under the safe, controlled environment of local authorities, and there wasn't any risk of danger or conflict or collateral damage because the federal agents were literally coming into California, going into the jail system and picking up these violent criminals, taking them and processing through their federal system. And so that's what used to happen. And that's actually what happened under Obama. He deported something like over 8 million people from the United States when he was in office. He did so through his immigration enforcement. Tens of thousands of those were violent criminals, but we didn't see clashes in the streets or conflicts with states over their sanctuary policies. Why not? Because Obama's federal immigration authorities were allowed to go into the jail settings and the prison settings and apprehend violent criminals that were subject to ICE detainers under the control of local authorities. So at the time then, Obama's federal immigration enforcement officers were frankly permitted, the conditions were there for a peaceful enforcement of those laws. Right now, we're not seeing a peaceful enforcement like we see in Minneapolis and other parts of the country where there are clashes in the streets. Well, it's the sanctuary policies that took the basically the turning over or the handing over of these violent criminals to federal authorities. The sanctuary policies took it out of the jail setting and pushed it out into the street, as I say, on the campaign trail in front of grandma's house. So now we have ICE agents playing cat and mouse, trying to apprehend violent criminals in our streets. That shouldn't be occurring. It should be occurring in the jail setting. So when I'm Attorney General, the federal government, the federal immigration authorities are going to be allowed to enforce their federal laws. And then two, I'm going to ensure that we have peaceful enforcement of all laws. We are not going to have clashes in the street. We're not going to have the drama that we see and like we saw in Minneapolis. And frankly, we're not going to have collateral damage. Like, we know 2 people at least who have died, as a result of these clashes in Minnesota. Those 2 people would be alive today, sadly to say. They would be alive today, but for sanctuary policies. So it's the sanctuary policies that are creating the danger. The federal enforcement to get violent criminals out of our neighborhoods and out of the country has happened for decades. This is nothing new. So when I'm Attorney General, I'm going to make sure that we get back to the peaceful enforcement of all laws and allow the federal government to enforce their laws as well.
Well, that sounds like a great plan, mostly for someone like us. We're residents of California, and of course, I believe this is one of the best state in the entire country and deserves to be brought back to a level of law, order, and safety and thriving as it is in all its business. But we have an issue, which is voter fraud. Voter fraud, we have seen it at the federal level, at local level, and just recently, the current Attorney General, Bonta, tried to attempt to stop an investigation started by Sheriff Bianco on massive voter fraud. Yeah. What does it tell us about the Democratic opponents, the Democrats, the other side, how they face the challenge of free election, I would say, without interference?
Yeah. Well, a couple things I would note that Governor Newsom and Attorney General Rob Bonta, they are just, I call them Sacramento elitists who are completely out of touch with everyday Californians. And they're so out of touch that Rob Bonta, our Attorney General, actually thought it was a good idea as a matter of politics, not as a matter of good policy or as a matter of election integrity, but as a matter of politics. He thought it was a good idea to actually go into court and seek an emergency order to shut down the investigation that the sheriff and the Riverside authorities are attempting to engage in. They want to investigate how there is a discrepancy in their vote totals from the Prop 50 special election, that discrepancy between the numbers they have and the numbers that the Secretary of State has recorded. There's approximately a 45 plus thousand vote discrepancy between the 2 numbers. Again, that is the official Riverside count for the Prop 50 election. And then the Secretary of State, the state of California, her count for Riverside County. So between the 2 numbers, there's a nearly 50 1,000 vote discrepancy. The Riverside officials want to look into it, investigate it, find the explanation for how that can occur, and get to the truth of the matter. And in the process of doing so, Attorney General Rob Bonta went into court seeking an emergency order to shut down that investigation. Why would our Attorney General, who is the top law enforcement agent in the state of California, who should be seeking justice, who should be seeking truth, who should be doing the work of everyday Californians, the public, why would he shut down an investigation like that? It's very suspicious. I don't think it's a good look for him. And I'm going to make sure while I'm out on the campaign trail that everybody knows about the kind of attorney general that we have right now. He's playing politics, and it's really, frankly, a pretty dangerous game. He should not be interfering in a rightful investigation. That looks and smells to many people like obstruction of justice. He's literally stepping in the way of a rightful investigation based on a legitimate concern about a discrepancy, a massive discrepancy in our elections, election integrity there in Riverside. Now, what I would like to assure Californians is when I'm Attorney General, again, you're going to hear this a lot, we're going to comply with all federal and state laws. That not only applies to criminal laws, but it also applies to elections laws. And as you may know, California was sued by the Department of Justice last year for violating federal elections laws. And Orange County, California was sued last year for violating federal elections laws. I was actually at the DOJ, and I was the one that launched those lawsuits and filed those lawsuits against California and Orange County when I was in Washington, D.C. working for the Department of Justice, because I saw and my team saw that California was not compliant, that they weren't cleaning their voter rolls like they're supposed to do under the federal elections laws, that there were some questions about voter registration here in California. So I was the one that filed those lawsuits. Now, when I'm AG, I'm going to be proactive in making sure that we as a state are complying with federal elections laws and then also state laws. Our ROVs and all of our county clerks don't even comply with all of our state elections laws, which are designed to promote election integrity. So there's a whole lot of work there when it comes to addressing, like you said, generally concerns about voter fraud and irregularities. But it's something that as Attorney General, making sure that we're compliant with all federal elections laws and state elections laws as well, that we can clean up our systems for sure.
Michael, do you have any inclination that any Democrats in the state of California are actually trying to support this transparency that you've just discussed in Riverside and other parts of the state, or are the Democrats working in unison to block these investigations into these irregularities that I'm assuming are not simply in Riverside, but around the state?
Right. The Democrats are absolutely not. Nobody has stepped up and advocated for transparency at all. And as we have seen, even nationally with the SAVE Act, we've got Democrats who are standing in the way of trying to put mechanisms in place, put measures in place like the SAVE Act to ensure that we have election integrity. I mean, the federal law is clear that in order to be eligible to vote, you have to be a citizen of the United States. So to require proof is just a measure to ensure that that law is being followed and enforced. What we're trying to do here, whether it's the SAVE Act or the measures in California, this is nothing new. This is common sense and it's already baked into law. But as you said, we've got Democrats not only not advocating for transparency, but they are actually running interference on trying to have, frankly, clean elections and compliance with federal and state laws. I have said this out on the campaign trail repeatedly, and I'm not afraid to say it and go on the record. Attorney General Bonta was appointed by Newsom as a political appointee to the office of Attorney General in 2021 to fill an empty seat. So he was a political appointed Attorney General at first. He was put there, I believe, to run interference on investigations and when people ask questions, and like the sheriff in Riverside trying to look into something of great concern like election integrity. He's there to actually run interference and cover for corruption. I mean, just look at it this way. He's been in office for 5 years. We are now seeing that there's it was 250 billion. That was the estimate. Now it's $500 billion of lost taxpayer money through waste, fraud, and abuse. That's $500 billion. That's more than $12,000 per person in the state of California. There's 40 million people. That's more than $12,000 per person of lost tax money by Sacramento through waste, fraud, and abuse. And what has Bonta done in response? Nothing. He's literally not asked a question about it. He's not launched an investigation. All of this has ballooned on his watch. He's been in office for 5 years, and now we see nearly $500 billion of hard-earned taxpayer money lost by Sacramento through waste, fraud, and abuse. And now we see the federal government getting involved. Why would the federal government need to be getting involved, whether it's from Washington, D.C., or as we've seen in Central District with Bill Asaley? Why are they having to do the investigations? Why is Bill Asaley the only one that's identifying wrongdoers and indicting them and trying to seek justice against them? Why is he the only one? Why isn't our Attorney General doing this job? He should be doing this job. And when I'm Attorney General, I guarantee I will be doing this job. I will be transparent, like you said, for the people. I will allow investigations to proceed, especially if it's of great concern for the public, like election integrity. When those issues come up, irregularities come up, allegations of fraud come up, and then also the money, the taxpayer money lost through waste, fraud, and abuse. I will be at the front of the line trying to find out where that money has gone. I will prosecute the wrongdoers. I'll put them behind bars, and I'm actually going to use the criminal justice system to claw that money back and return it to the taxpayer. So that $500 billion was stolen from the taxpayer and spent. I'm going to find out where it was spent. We're going to sell those assets. We're going to liquidate, get the money back, and return it to the taxpayer. I'm going to be leading the charge on all of these things. But where's our Attorney General Bonta right now? He's missing. He's MIA. He's completely silent on all of this. Why? Because he's covering for corruption. I think he knows who the wrongdoers are, frankly. He has already got some questionable associations. Some of his political friends have already been indicted. So he knows who took the money, I think, and he doesn't want to shed light on it. He doesn't want justice for the wrongdoers. So he's covering for corruption. There's a pattern of that, and so we need a new Attorney General for sure.
Absolutely, and whoever has lived in California in these past years knows that impunity, as you mentioned, law enforcement is an issue. Mm-hmm. Having people feeling comfortable in just robbing stores and just walking out without the fear of any consequence is actually a cancer of California. Mm-hmm. And I believe that besides any political views, everyone agrees upon safety, law and order. Unless you're a criminal, you don't. But I believe most of people are not criminals. So we need definitely change. Thanks so much for this wonderful conversation. And I've just one last question. I want to emphasize that you have both federal and local experience, as we know. Yeah. What did you learn about the system while you were working at the U.S. Department of Justice?
Well, working with the federal government was an amazing opportunity. I worked at the highest levels of the Department of Justice. In fact, my position was so high that in order to be in a higher position, you had to be Senate confirmed. So it's the highest level you could operate at the Department of Justice without being Senate confirmed. So it was a real honor. It was a privilege. I was right there at 950 Pennsylvania Avenue, a 12-minute walk from the White House. I worked on the 5th floor. Pam Bondi's office was right down the hall. I mean, it was just an amazing experience. I think what I learned and appreciated was just the awesomeness of the work that they can do. I mean, just for me to be a part of those election integrity lawsuits. I sued California, as I mentioned, Orange County, California. I also sued a dozen other states. The awesomeness, that authority, that ability to make things right across the nation was pretty remarkable. What I also learned, though, is that, it's difficult. There's so many things that really need to be addressed across the nation, that, having enough resources, to do all of that great work, was difficult. So, it was great. There's politics everywhere. There's great work everywhere, like we did in the Department of Justice. I saw similar things when I was the city attorney of Huntington Beach. There's politics everywhere, but there's also great work to be done there as well. So, It really was a fantastic experience. And I give all the credit to the Department of Justice right now for moving the ball forward on a lot of important issues, particularly with regard to election integrity, because, and this is an interesting note too, when we at the Department of Justice last year started to enforce the federal elections laws, the National Voter Registration Act, and also the Help America Vote Act, and we really started to enforce those laws in earnest, that was frankly the first time those laws had been enforced in earnest in like ever. Like we looked back 5 years and we couldn't find that there was serious enforcement about, with regard to those laws. We looked back to 10 years and we couldn't find, there was no history of our department, our division actually enforcing the NVRA and HAVA in earnest. So it was really neat to be there early in the Trump administration in February and start that process of taking up enforcement of the federal elections laws in earnest for, frankly, the first time in recent memory. So it was really an honor.
Well, Michael, it was a real honor and pleasure to have you on this show. I think you are the right man for the right time at the right place to help restore justice and credibility and accountability to the state of California. So we appreciate you clarifying your positions for our audience. Where can our audience follow you and support your run for AG?
Thank you. Yeah, they can visit my website if they want to learn more. That's gates4ag.com. That's GATES, the number 4, ag.com. If they want to go to the website, you can find me on X at Michael Gates ESQ. Again, that's Michael Gates ESQ, like Esquire. And then on Instagram at michael.e.gates. Again, michael.e.gates. So you can search me on social media, X or Instagram, and you'll find me. But you can go to my website as well. And anybody who wants to sign up, they can put in their name, they can join the team, and you'll get regular updates. You can make a contribution as well. That'll obviously help keep the momentum going and help us get the word out when we get closer to Election Day. So any support that anybody can offer today would be amazing. So thank you so much, George. Thank you both.
Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you soon as AG of California.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All good?
That was. Welcome to Global View. Today I have the pleasure to introduce a very special guest, Michael Gates, City Attorney of Huntington Beach